Hi everyone, so in this video I'm going to be talking through section B of the GCSE Drama exam, component 3 that is, which is the theatre review. So one thing that I do want to acknowledge is that there are two questions within the theatre review section. One of them is a 6 marker, which is analyse, and one of them is the 9 marker, which is evaluate. Now, there is another video where I talk about the differences between analyse and evaluate in more depth, but just to refresh you, analyse is when you zoom in on a picture and you look at one detail of it. Evaluate is when you look at the big picture and say the good things and the bad things about it. So analyse is zooming in, evaluate is looking at the big picture. So in terms of this question, you will have gone to have seen a play, and it is your responsibility for this question to say if you thought it was good or not. And only you can make that decision if you thought it was effective or not. Remember as well that with it being a professional production, what we have gone to see, it is more likely to be effective than not. It might just be your personal taste that means you don't like it. So for example, if we've seen a comedy, it might not be your sense of humour. So do just think about that as well. So if we go with cider for our structure for both questions, there's a slight difference between the analysis and the evaluation here, but it's basically the same structure. So I've put these together into one video. One thing I will say as well is do remember you have your notes for this in the exam, so it's not as much pressure. That's why I recommend starting with this first rather than with DNA first, because it really helps you get into exam mode, and it means that once that information and these questions have been done, you can forget about it and spend the rest of the time reading the extract for DNA and focusing on those questions. So do make sure that you start with these if you can. That being said, if you do start with DNA, make sure you're leaving enough time for these questions, and also just don't forget them altogether. Remember, it's that really dodgy, really tiny last page of the exam paper because it's only these two questions on there. Make sure you do this, okay? So if we are cidering, the first thing for your context, and this is the same for both analyse and evaluate, is to say what scene or moment you are looking at. So the question itself might ask you about one key moment, or it might be more vague and it might ask you about the opening or the end, for example. Remember as well that it swaps between analyse and evaluate if you're talking about a physical skill or a vocal skill or stage space or any of the design skills, but both questions won't be the same type. So one will be performance based, one would be design based. Which way round, we don't know. So you're setting up the scene and the moment that you are talking about. You then as well can add in the context of the play. So for example, if we went to go and see Bouncers, you would say Bouncers is a play by John Godber about nightlife for the working class in the 80s. In the scene where the bouncers are pretending to be hairdressers, they use da-da-da-da, and that's how you'd go into the rest of the cider. Hopefully that's a good example for you to get your head around. You can as well for this, if you are doing set design, draw a set design, that kind of thing, if time is running out. So do just bear that in mind as well. So as always with Identify, we are getting our vocabulary in there. So we are trying to pinpoint a keyword that relates to the question. So something like if we're analysing sound and music, we might talk about the speakers and their positioning within the room. If we are analysing stage space, we might talk about the area of the stage in which a monologue took place, that kind of thing. So we're trying to pinpoint what it is we're doing. Then, if this is an analyse question, we're trying to add in more detail to the discuss direction. So even if you are evaluating, you need detail, but for the analyse question, you get most of your marks here. So do just bear that in mind. You're trying to describe what it is that you saw. Remember, the person who's reading your answer didn't see the play, so you're trying to make it visual for them to understand what it is you're talking about. It also does mean, because they've probably not seen the play, that you can exaggerate the truth if that means that it's more succinct what you're saying. So for example, if you're talking about a physical skill in your vocabulary, you might want to give more details into what they actually did and jazz it up a little bit so you get more marks. After that, you evaluate. Now obviously for the evaluate question, this is where you get most of your marks as well, but you're talking about the effect. Now depending on what genre you saw, the effect will be really clear. If you saw a comedy, if the audience laughed, then it is effective because it's done its aim. Remember as well with this, you should have the director's name written down on your notes, so you can reference the director and their vision in there if you know that, that kind of thing. And you're saying if it was effective or not. And that can be your opinion and the opinions of the audience as a whole. You can also say if those opinions differ. So the audience laughed, however I found it cheesy, could be an example of that. And that kind of brings us to the R. Now, you have to make sure you use the word audience here, because the experience is what the review is about. So these two link together. Now, for your 6 marker for analysis, you want 2 paragraphs. For your 9 marker, you want 3. Okay, so hopefully this has helped your understanding of how to respond to the theatre review for the exam. Please make sure you look through your notes, because that will also help you with trying to remember what's actually gone on as well. So best of luck and break a leg.